Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Titans, Season 3, Episode 12. So, finally, frickin' finally, after 3 seasons and 12 episodes, frickin' finally, Beast Boy is now out of the doghouse. He's no longer to be called Best Boy, because he frickin' does something other than his usual combination of things. Which is just lion or snake once, right? Thank God. We finally have this happen once in a millennia. Luckily I was alive long enough to see Beast Boy do a thing. And I was like, yes. Thank the heavens. Now you can finally not have me complain and just immediately say Beast Boy should be a dead character. But it's kind of funny, when I was to eventually watch further on into the episode, Beast Boy ended up saying something, and I was like, I kind of snickered. And I'm like, what's the fate to be of Beast Boy? What does this mean, this dialogue that is to happen after this, both Raven and Beast Boy kind of talking it out about their powers and stuff, even though we end up having this kind of cringe moment where they're to kind of figure out where their powers supposedly come from. There's a lot of side stories in this episode, so there's a lot of just things all over the place. But really, I'm like, well, at least it seems, even though there's still a hint of retconning going on in this freaking episode, they had to retcon a very iconic story because certain character reasons, which I am just not happy about that. No. You do not take a good story and then change and retcon it just to fit your goal of this thing, which we'll get to that. We'll get to that in spoilers. Like, I'm trying to pull back as much as possible to not spoil things in cryptic sense here, but then eventually we'll get into spoilers and I'll talk about that because, I know. That was a no over there. Really, they could have cut the whole, there was a big chunk of Grayson's story that they honestly could have cut out of this episode to much more focus on the side characters, because those characters honestly should have had more time anyways. They've kind of earned it. They've deserved it. If anything, it should have been much more of a Battle of the Cow situation, which that never happened at all in this show, which they should have. But it also tells me how important certain other characters are compared to Nightwing with this episode, and I'll talk about that. So, because, I can't be 100% pleased about this episode, because we went from a show that I'm like, God, this show is awful, to it's good enough. So, we'll eventually see how this show ends, because I usually have complaints about shows that are to be called Titans, which either end or eventually have a premiere episode where I also have to just rah about that. So, teeing it up, what is this episode about? Well, Grayson is to seemingly be dead. And so it seems like the Titans will have to go off without him, because they'll actually get side stories in this episode for them specifically. But Grayson will also have his own side story. Maybe he's going off to heaven. Maybe they're going to go and turn him into Deadman, and maybe he'll just be a ghost. We're going to pull off the Injustice story here, where Nightwing is to be dead, he's to go and become a ghost, and he's going to siphon into everyone's body. Wouldn't that have been a cool story for a while to just pull off? No. Could they have gotten to a Battle of the Cow kind of story? No. So here's eventually in spoilers what eventually they end up doing. So Superboy is with Blackfire and Starfire, and eventually he is to have some usefulness, which bravo to that. Superboy actually has something to do here because Blackfire is still alive, so Superboy has something to do. And I mean do. So Troy is to meet up with Tim Drake, and so Tim Drake is to eventually go on this mission of him desperately pleading to Donna Troy to, could I be Robin? Could I pretty please be Robin? But I think it's my destiny to be Robin. Like, and that's like the whole thing with them is him desperately pleading to be Robin, and Troy is just like, well, we'll figure something out. I don't know. You're just gonna have to beg and plead and like kiss my boots, and then maybe we'll figure something out. Maybe you'll have to put on some kind of red cape or something. But like, don't think that'll happen in this season. Immediately think that'll probably happen either at the very last episode or episode 1, season 4. I'm assuming it's going to be episode 1 of season 4 is going to be Tim Drake is going to be Robin, because I'm gonna put money on it that there's probably going to be a cliffhanging thing where Tim Drake is eventually going to become Robin, like between the seasons probably, and he's going to get all this training done, and then he'll be possibly a Robin, but a Robin in training, because oh, I can't talk about that. Like I was thinking, well, I could incorporate this character, but no, I can't. I can't say what's to be infaded of certain kind of characters, let's just say. So Raven and Beast Boy are to have a side mission in this episode, which I'm like, man, just Raven comes back and I don't really care what she's doing. But she's back. That's all that matters, is that she's back. I don't care what she's doing, but she exists. So we can be happy about that. Barbara Gordon is doing something quasi-interesting, mainly at the tail end of this episode. And Red Hood is still a character that is really just there, but just needs other people to be relevant, which is freaking sad. We built this guy up so good in the beginning of the season, so good, but then eventually they just basically basically he just became like Patrick Swayze in the movie Ghost, where like he was a relevant person in the beginning, then all of a sudden like he died, and then he was a ghost for a while and was trying to figure out what the heck to do. But then eventually, like, he started to have the finger power where he used to move things with his finger, and then he was starting to become a relevant ghost again. And then all of a sudden, like, that's when Patrick Swayze all of a sudden at the very end of things is like, oh, well, I'm going to go and help out my wife and defend her from all these guys that are going to try to attack her, and I'm going to help her and save her. And then eventually he goes off to heaven. So, like, Red Hood is just like Patrick Swayze's Ghost. So maybe he'll have some relevance at the very end of this, or the tail end of this thing, because, like, he has to, right? Maybe they'll shove him in, like, hey, man, here's your team of people. Like, just go and F off. Or maybe they're going to do 2 different teams, where it's going to be a team against team thing. That would be interesting. Maybe they can incorporate some Arrow people or something. I don't know. Because those guys need to make a buck, right? I don't know. So, I've talked for too long. Let's go into spoilers, because there's not much to say. But Beast Boy has finally gotten out of the doghouse because he did a thing. Thank gravy boat captain. It took so freaking long to do that. But yeah, we can be finally just score one for the show because we finally realized that people have been bickering about this guy. So let's go into it. It is spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this episode. So let's get into the only important part about this entire episode, because they retcon a story and they also do something finally good for one character. So let's talk about the Beast Boy Raven stuff. So, like, I'm going to go into what stories I think are the most important and then kind of dwindle down to just like, well, I guess I'll go and talk about this. So, and then eventually also I'm going to put a pin in the Beast Boy Raven story, because at some point it gets to a certain other character and then I don't care. And then we'll kind of mix in all the other side stories and then get back to the person that I don't care about story. And I'll get to that. So, Beast Boy and Raven. So Beast Boy and Raven coincidentally are to bump into Nightwing's dead body because the story will tell them to. And because Raven is to use her magically delicious powers to find the Lazarus Pit, and then eventually she'll use her, or eventually they'll track down Grayson and find his dead body. And so, like, oh great, Nightwing's dead. Like, well, I guess we'll have to go without him, right? Like, he's dead, right? We're just gonna have to battle the cow this out and like create a much better story without him. And Beast Boy is like, oh no, I don't think that can happen because bats are swarming. So all of a sudden, Beast Boy turns into a bat. A green bat, yes, but a bat nonetheless. And so all of a sudden, all the bats are weirdly just carrying Grayson to the Lazarus Pit. And I'm like, wow. So let me get this straight. So Donna Troy dies, and it takes her 9 episodes to get resurrected. But Dick Grayson dies at the tail end of one episode to just be revived at the beginning of another episode. Man, just like importance of characters, right? Like, you can't just live without one whole episode without Dick Grayson in it, now can you? But you can live 9 episodes without Donna Troy. Wow, that kind of devalues certain other characters besides Grayson now, doesn't it? Because, man, immediately once Donna Troy was to be dead, plus, I don't even remember what episode she actually died on, because then, like, because I'm saying 9 episodes, but when was the actual episode she actually died on? Because then that would be, like, plus X number of whatever episode she died on in previous whatever episodes, also, besides the 9 other episodes. I don't remember. So it doesn't matter, right? Because Donna Troy evidently is an important enough character to resurrect within a small portion of time, right? It seems so garbage, because I actually like that character. And plus, with her kind of being in the mix right now, especially with her and Tim Drake, I can actually like this character. Like, her kind of mixing it up with Nightwing, I was like, but it seems like her and Tim Drake being together are seemingly a much better story, I think, between the two stories that Donna was to be mixed in with, and eventually her being with Aqualad. I think still, like, Donna Troy being with Tim Drake is probably the better out of the 3 of those stories, possibly. But pushing on. So Grayson is to be dumped into the Lazarus Pit. And so now we have to go into the retconning of story. So Grayson is to, I guess, be in a questionable purgatory or some kind of weird mind thing where he's to try to figure out how to resurrect himself I don't know, it's some weird mental thing where it's like, well, you can dump in the Lazarus pit, but his soul has to fight his way back into his body. So I guess that's technically what we're doing here. So Crane weirdly is to mostly be in these weird, bizarre dream sequences that Grayson is to have, and so Crane is kind of giving him this weird kind of thing, this kind of talking to eventually push Grayson into eventually seeing his father, because I think that's the real reason why Grayson wants to die, is because he wants to see his family. And he sees his whole father. Not his whole family, his whole father. Because I guess no one else of his family wanted to return. Whatever. So Grayson doesn't get to say goodbye to his whole family. It's just his dad. So I guess we just have to be happy with that, right? So so eventually what happens is Grayson is to say that the Joker did not kill Jason Todd. It was Grayson all along that killed Jason Todd, because Grayson hated Jason for whatever reason. Grayson barely knew that Todd even existed, but he just hates him weirdly. I don't think Grayson even cared. But, like, they just have to retcon a story. They just have to push their own, like, well, just the Nightwing has to be, like, such a uber, like, strong character here that, no, we have to retcon Under the Red Hood to say that Nightwing was in the Joker costume and was killing Jason Todd all along. And that is going to confuse a lot of people who probably have never actually seen Under the Red Hood. And so they're like, oh my god, Grayson was actually the one who killed Todd because of his jealousy, because they didn't actually see the face of the killer, because they couldn't have. But then they just retconned it later to just say Grayson killed. So people are probably going to get so confused of why Grayson killed Jason Todd originally. Whatever. Retcon your story, stupid people. And confuse people also who probably didn't go and see stuff like Under the Red Hood or read any comic books or whatever. And now they're just like, wait a minute, when was Nightwing a villainous person? Whatever. So, because some people could easily get that confusion for whatever reason. The Joker killed Jason Todd. Do not retcon that garbage. No. That's the only thing I hated about this whole entire episode, was that if there's not some goofy stories that eventually they have to kind of show where everybody's kind of going here. So Grayson just starts clubbing on Todd, just crowbarring him up, just like, yeah, I'm gonna just like what hurts more, backhand, forehand. Like, I'm of course talking about the Under the Red Hood animated series, because I just would like remember that too, where it's just like where I would just remember bits and pieces of that, where it's just like it's hilarious, but it's sad. So Jason is getting clubbed, and so eventually switched to Grayson. All of a sudden, like at first he's like face to face with Jason Todd, and Crane is to say, it's like, well, the real villain was never like Jason Todd. The real villain is me, and and you have failed to take me down and blah 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 and all this garbage. So Grayson is like, no, I want to take you down. I want to fight you. And so Grayson ends up punching Crane to eventually wake up from the Lazarus pit. And it's like, oh, bravo, Grayson, you're back alive again. And so now the good part about this is we get to see what journey someone is to take when they are to come from the Lazarus pit. So, like, for characters that are like Ra's al Ghul, it's kind of interesting to, I guess, that's the thing that Ra's al Ghul ends up seeing when he comes from the Lazarus pit. That's the challenges that he ends up having to go through. So, now, here's a part where I just no longer care about the Grayson thing. Because eventually he just gets his... he eventually just gets some clothes on and is like, hey, like... you guys go and you find Troy and start working with her. And Raven and Beast Boy are like, Troy? Like, what is he mentioning Troy for? Because evidently Dick knows that she's still alive weirdly because I guess he was dead. Whatever. So he just weirdly knows that she's alive now. But I guess Raven should technically know that that she's alive. We also had Raven who tried to resurrect Grayson, but evidently he had been dead for far too long. I'm like, again, difference between Troy and Grayson, but I guess still, Troy revived herself, where Grayson needed the Lazarus pit. So whatever. Anyways, because Troy is a much more stronger person, right? Yes. Anyways, so pushing on to all the side stories, and then we'll get back to Grayson, who has to do a little bit of a team up at the tail end of this episode. So now all the side story crap. So, because the only person that is important is Grayson. It's obvious. So, Barbara Gordon. Barbara Gordon is to be in a jail cell, and she is consistently being teased by Crane. Gordon is to eventually talk to the one detective that had a whole entire story arc in one episode, and I forget what his name is because I'm going off no IMDb today. And I didn't think I'd have to remember that guy's name. Because it's like, he's in the show for like 2 seconds, and then he's gone. Well, technically 4 seconds, because... So, the guy walks in, and so Barbara's like, hey, what are you doing? And he's like, what, you wouldn't? And then he dumps her food tray and then leaves. And then so, later on in the episode, Barbara Gordon ends up escaping by knocking this detective out, because evidently they didn't realize that she had like freaking like weapons and sticks and stuff in her wheelchair, because of course they wouldn't have. And so she ends up going into this elevator, and she really has nowhere to go. So she decides to try to reactivate Oracle at the very end of this episode, but it seems like she doesn't know how. So she's just going to be stuck down there for however long, because what else could she really do? Maybe eventually, like, Superboy will, like, super hear her or something. But we can't trust Superboy either. So let's go into the... let's go into the Starfire Blackfire story, because, like, I think that could be decently important. Much more important than the Barbara Gordon stuff, but I just wanted to quickly get that out. So, it seems that we have a Superboy Blackfire team up yet again, and so both of them go off to meet up with Blackfire's scientist, the guy that was kind of keeping her into that one prison cell for the longest time. It seems that he has chosen to eventually come out of the underground to be in some other kind of setup headquarters deal. So eventually, Superboy and Blackfire are to find this guy, hoist him up, and so Blackfire is to now have Starfire's power, but of course, Starfire is to have found her own power in the last episode, but still. So, really, what the real breakdown of this is that the scientist is to let Blackfire know, hey, yeah, like, I still have your ship if you want to just go back to your home planet, hopefully, because I don't want you freaking here anymore. That would be great. So you guys can go freaking away so I don't have to be threatened of death every X amount of minutes. So Starfire is just like, well, maybe I should go home to a place that hates me. Like, because at first she's like, well, maybe I shouldn't go home because that place hates me. But then she's like, well, no, maybe I should go home because this is a place that hates me. Maybe it'll be great, me going to Tamarin and just having a bang old time. And so Superboy is like, well, wait, like, I can't go with you to Tamarin because, like, Kryptonians just aren't, like, all that good at Tamarin. I'm like, yeah, because there has never really been a comic book where you end up seeing like, I've seen Teen Titans where, of course, like, we've seen Tamarin, but there was no Superboy there, or Kryptonian of any kind. So yeah, I guess, like, they just had to figure out in this story that Kryptonians are just not good in Tamarin, I guess. So Blackfire is to tell Superboy, it's like, well, yeah, but I have to go to Tamarin. I just have to, for whatever reason, I had to quickly just come up with in a matter of seconds. So Blackfire kisses Superboy and is to have Superboy concoct this Earth core kind of fuel for this ship. And so he has to kind of, with his hands, kind of weirdly wield this Dragon Ball Z like ball thing and to toss it into this ship. And the one thing that I did not mention, which I'll mention now, so Starfire is to eventually go to where Superboy was, and Superboy weirdly was to be hit with some kind of kryptonite-like weapon. And supposedly Superboy was to, I think, say that Grayson had done this to him, or Nightwing had done this to him. And so Starfire was to say, well, F the Titans. How about you and me just do whatever we want? And so that led to them to go to this scientist, and eventually the scientist is like, well, hey, I have your ship here, and so, like, now we're back to where we are. So before we finish off this story, we also had Raven and Beast Boy, who also went to the hideout where Superboy was, and eventually they realized that they're like, what's this green stuff? And they're like, well, it seems like kryptonite. And they had to tell you this conveniently at some part of this story because Superboy is to put this fuel inside the ship. The ship is to supposedly accept this fuel. And then all of a sudden it seems like the ship is malfunctioning. And all of a sudden, the ship explodes. And so I think that takes out everybody but Superboy. And so Superboy, I think, is going to finally turn into the villain that I've been wanting for so long. Superboy, if you could just shave your head and then just slice your shirt into a big L and just become a villain that I've been wanting for a while. Or maybe Superboy is going to eventually justify what he's doing, but then underneath he's gonna he'll be the villain that the Titans doesn't realize that they have. That would be cool. Where Superboy is to finally actually have a story that's relevant for him that turns him into a villain. I would hope. But I want Superboy to eventually at first play around with his food before he eats it, so to speak. Where Superboy is to mention it's well, I guess I didn't realize what I was doing. I'm sorry. It was an accident. I didn't know that the ship was gonna blow up, or I didn't know this ship would blow up if it didn't accept the right amount of fuel. I didn't have time to test this, and that's where they could play with that until Superboy is oh no, I'm just a villain in the story. But I hope that they stretch that out, and then eventually Superboy is oh no, I'm a villain in the story. Just so you guys know, straight up villain. And they'll be whoa, and that'll be a cool thing to go into season 4 with Superboy being a villain, because at least he'll have something to do. That I will be happy with. So now let's go with the Troy Tim Drake story. So it seems that Tim Drake's family is going and getting some guns together, and I'm sorry, Tim Drake's parents were just gunned down by... Wouldn't Tim Drake just be no, I can't for the life of me put another gun in my hands because my parents had died via guns? You would have thought he would have taken the Bruce Wayne route to this, but evidently he's just oh no, I'm just gonna go and chuck a gun in my hand. You would have thought that would have happened, but I guess not. So evidently this family's getting ready to go out, and so they all of a sudden are hearing a vehicle coming their way, and it's to be this GCPD vehicle. All of a sudden Troy is to come out of the GCPD vehicle and say okay, family, come on, we're gonna find a place for you guys to be safe. And so Tim Drake is telling Troy hey, Robin though, right? And Troy is no, you just got to go with your family and keep them safe. But Troy ends up going along with them anyways. So Troy and Drake are driving along, and Tim is but yo, Robin, soon, right? Episode 4, first episode of episode 4, right? This guy switching costumes, and Troy is I can't say it. I can't spoil it for everyone. We have to drag this out. And because Tim Drake is but my destiny though. I feel it in my bones that I need to be Robin for whatever reason. And Troy is just well, yeah, but you could get hurt, or you could die, or some other kind of stupid reasoning. And Tim Drake is not technically trained. We are to naturally assume, because we don't know what kind of training Drake even has. So, I guess he has father training from years of his father being on technically the Force. So anyways, pushing on. So eventually it gets where there's to be this roadblock where all of a sudden all these GCPD are there. And so Drake's friend person guy thing, because I didn't IMDb this, is to eventually flash his badge and to say, hey, I'm GCPD, but I'm retired. It seems that you guys wanted extra help, so I'm here to eventually get you guys supplies. And so they're oh, well, hey, good, let me go and check those supplies. Let me see what every supply thing that you have brought in us. And they're like, oh crap. Because everything that's in the back of this vehicle is just people. And so they end up opening the back, of course. Tim Drake is back there. And so now they basically have to fight all the GCPD. Troy grabs the door of the back of this vehicle, and then is to press on, and like that's all you really get to see of them. So now we have to, because I think I've covered everything. Where is Dove is my question. I guess she's not coming back. Or so we think. Because there's still one more episode, probably, because the last season was 13 episodes. So I'm assuming there's going to be one more episode left of this. And then we're going to call it a wrap, unless they're going to be like, oh no, we're just going to do 20 episodes. I'm like, God, this doesn't need to do a 20 episode show. Don't do it like freaking all those other things. Like, just do one more episode, call it done. Give us some cliffhangers of this season to definitely give us a villain at the end of the next episode, and just for us to try and be excited about the next season. Or they can easily just wipe out what is to seemingly be another villain that they create at the tail end of this season and kill said person off, let's just say. Especially if it's going to be Superboy, maybe they might just wipe him out in one episode and turn him good again, or kill him off, which would be like, wow, this season ended, whoa! They killed off Superboy, which was only relevant for a limited time. They killed him off, and then they also killed off Beast Boy, 2 characters, because we had that stretch of dialogue where Beast Boy was to mention when he was to change into this bat that he was to feel like he was dying, and I was like, like, yes. Sadly, I was like, yes. But, like, Raven was to say that, weirdly, the reason why she could defeat Trigon is because the power of love. And so Beast Boy had love for Nightwing. And also there was some kind of stuff that they were saying here that can completely be taken out of context and be put in an X-rated variation of this show. And I wouldn't blame them 1 second. Because if you, like, just cut the scene a specific way, it seemed that Raven was saying something, and it sounded hilarious. She loves somebody, or she loves something a lot. I don't know. It was hilarious, but everybody is probably going to take that one line out of context, because why wouldn't they? So... God, that was goofy. So, Beast Boy is teasing his death to us people, and so we have to just be like, what's gonna happen? But yeah, so, what is left to talk about? Well, it seems that Nightwing is back alive again, in one fell swoop of barely any downtime whatsoever for this character, really. So, the very first thing that Nightwing decides to do is to team up with Jason, because Jason's in the city, unmasked, just, like, firing away, just like, hey, like, what the heck, I'm your savior, but you're, like, not proud of me, you're not happy of me, you're not happy that I saved all of you people? And then so, Nightwing just shows up, and Todd's like, how is it possible? I saw you dead. I saw you die. And Nightwing is just like, yeah, with all that, like, whatever. Like, let's get to the real task at hand here. You, me, team up. Let's go after, let's go after Crane and try to do a takedown of Crane. And so, like, Todd is just like, so I'm a Titan again. And Nightwing is like, I don't know, like, you're something. Like, we'll figure out that whole thing afterwards. Like, just, like, if anything, like you have to come up with some kind of reason for being relevant again. So, when Jason Todd was getting whipped with hook chains, eventually Crane was doing all this blah 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 talking. Like, every time this guy talks, I immediately do not want to listen to a word this guy says, because all of it is just jibber jabber crap that makes no whatever. Like, it seems weirdly in this episode, Crane sounds more like the Riddler than anybody else. Because we also end up seeing weirdly and consistently that Crane is to have this poem book. And I'm like, so he's not saying riddles, he's saying poems now? Really? They had to come up with some kind of way to have this guy be some kind of word kind of smith or something. So eventually what ends up happening is that Todd was to mention to Nightwing about some weapon where Batman had kept because he wanted to study this Crane weaponry to try and, I guess, come up with some kind of antidote or some kind of thing against it. And so Nightwing was to figure that out, and so he's like, oh my god, we need to go and find this weapon and before Crane goes and gets it. So both Todd and Grayson go to where this weapon is being held, and they're like, oh my god, it's like Crane's poem book is here, so that means he got to it. I'm like, yeah, there has to be some calling card. They can't have the Scarecrow mask be there now, can they? Because immediately in this episode, I was still kind of thinking, like, man, can't just Scarecrow just have, like, some kind of, like, second moment something to have this Scarecrow mask on his face? Like, can we just have it where, like, especially in that dream sequence, he can just wear the mask, and then every other moment, he can just not wear the mask? Just one snippet of a second. Like, did they have to pay some royalties to somebody for them to do that? Because heaven forbid. Like, oh, we have to pay royalties if a guy named Crane is to put on a mask and look like the Scarecrow? So, like, they only want to just pay royalties for whoever created the Crane character, so it cheapens it. Because they just have to make Crane a much more demented-looking character, whichever. So now Crane has all these crates of all this weaponry that I don't even know the name of. And it just looks like kryptonite weaponry. Like, it's green, and I'm like, man, like, is this just, like, fear toxin? Is it Joker toxin? Is it a combination of all kinds of stuff? All kinds of weaponry? Is this massive, weaponized, nuclear gas of a thing? What is this? So I guess we'll have to figure out next week on Titans. So I'm going to get out of here. The episode was good enough, so I'm going to get out of here. Hopefully I covered everything. There might have been some backpedaling of me going on maybe next week, because I'm like, oh yeah, this happened, and I completely forgot about it, because that's bound to happen. But there's so many side stories going on to this episode, I would have hoped or thought that I would have gotten confused, but I didn't, seemingly. But, like, I didn't know what everything was, or really I didn't want to talk about the whole Crane hook chain situation. That was stupid. Like, again, that's just, like, Crane just, like, basically pistol whipping Todd to just be like, yeah, you're still a relevant character. I'm going to take your own guns and beat you with them. Like, basically, that's what Crane is really doing there, is basically just saying that Todd is still a relevant character, and he has to team up with Nightwing to become relevant again. How ridiculous is that? So fast and so far has Red Hood fallen in the show. But I'm going to go here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.